Hi there, my name is Marley and welcome to my channel, or welcome back. Today I'm going to be doing the end of the year book survey or end of the year reading survey, whatever it's called. It's kind of like a tag video that I've seen quite a few booktubers do the last couple of years. I know Books and Lala does it, and I think a couple other like bigger booktubers, and basically it's just a bunch of questions about your reading year. It's kind of similar to the mid-year book freakout tag, but it's for the end of the year. So I've never done this before, but I am excited to. I've been wanting to do this, so let's get into it and see how my reading year was. So the first question is, how many books did you read and did you reach your goal? So obviously I'm filming and uploading this a little bit before the end of the year, but as of today, which is December 12th, I have read 107 books. So technically I did reach my reading goal. I wanted to read 100 books because I knew I reached over 100 last year, so I just thought it was a pretty good number to stick with this year. However, obviously I will be finishing a few more books for the next couple of weeks. I did have a little like low-key other goal, and that was to read 100 novels, because some of the books I read this year were manga volumes, which obviously are like a lot quicker to read than novels. So I had this little extra goal for myself to read 100 actual novels. 14 of the books I've read so far have been manga, so that means I need to read 7 more books in order to actually read 100 novels. So will I reach that goal? I don't know if I will. Right now I have scheduled in to read 5 books, so we'll just have to see if I can squeeze another 2 in there, and then I can reach my like second little goal. So the next question is, what is your most read genre? And I actually have been tracking my books more this year than any other year. So I can see that I have read the most thrillers this year, which is not a surprise because I do consider that my favorite genre. So 33.6% of the books I've read have been thriller. The next biggest one looks like it would be contemporary and then fantasy. I think the reason thriller was so big this year is because I like to read adult thriller, and I also like to read a lot of YA thrillers. So next up, it asks, what was the shortest and what was the longest book you read this year? And luckily Goodreads can show you this. So the shortest book I read was Every Heart a Doorway by Shauna Maguire. This is the first book in the Wayward Children series, which I read earlier this year, and I really loved it, but I have not continued the series yet. I really need to though. I really liked it. It's about these kids who go in these different doorways to different fantastical worlds, and then when they come back, they are basically like mourning their experience. So they go to this like home for children to like adapt them back to the real world, almost like a rehab. The longest book I read this year, Goodreads is saying it was Crescent City by Sarah J Maas, but I actually DNF'd that book. Technically I DNF'd it last year, but I was hoping I would actually get to it this year, like finish it off, because I got to like 40 or 45%, but I decided to actually fully DNF that this year. It's just not worth it for me to continue, so I did not actually finish it. But I do think my next longest book that I read was still a Sarah J Maas book, of course, and that was A Court of Wings and Ruin, which is a part of her ACOTAR series. It is the 3rd book, and that is a fantastical fairy series with also a lot of romance as well, and I actually have been enjoying that series. It is my favorite one by her, but I just don't know why I cannot get through Crescent City. It is not good. It is not as good. Next up is your favorite book published in 2022. I think I actually have one that I can grab here. So I think that's gonna have to be Bloodmarked by Tracy Deonn. I read this pretty recently, so you may have seen me talk about this already on my channel, but this is the sequel to Legendborn, which is a YA fantasy book, and it has to do with Arthurian legend, so it's really cool. I absolutely love this series. I feel like I consider thriller my favorite genre now, but YA fantasy honestly is like right up there too. I think it's so fun because it's YA. The fantasy elements are more easily digestible, and in this series in particular, I really love the main romantic relationship. I also like how the author weaves in so many like more serious and important topics into this series. I just think she does like a really fantastic job. What was my favorite debut book in 2022? So this book didn't come out in 2020, but it was a debut that I read this year, and that was In My Dreams I Hold a Knife by Ashley Winstead. This basically hit all the tropes that I love in thriller books, where we're following a group of friends, and one of their friends died when they were in college, and they thought they knew who the murderer was, but now it's like their college reunion where they're all coming back together together, and they're realizing that that person was actually innocent and it was someone else who killed her. So secrets are getting revealed. Of course, everyone has weird secrets and like different relationships between each other, and we're trying to figure out who the real killer is. Not only does it have amazing tropes, but it follows through on them, and I just really grew to love Ashley Winstead's writing, and I liked how flawed these characters were and how real they were. Next up is favorite book that was not published this year. For this, I think I'm going to say a book I read a little while ago, and that was Caraval by Stephanie Garber. This is another YA fantasy book that just hit for me. It is about these two sisters. They get wrapped up in this magical competition called Caraval when one of them gets kidnapped and the other one has to like enter and try and win the competition to get her sister back. This was another case where I just loved the world. It was so whimsical, magical, adventurous. It really was giving like Labyrinth vibes, which is one of my favorite movies. The romance in this also just really worked for me. So I still haven't read the rest of the series. I'm such a hypocrite. I say how much I love this and I haven't continued the series, but I definitely will next year. I really like this. The Mary Shelley Club by Goldie Moldavsky was also one of my favorite books that didn't come out this year. It came out last year. This is a YA thriller that I would really recommend. It's about a girl who gets involved in a secret society at her school called the Mary Shelley Club, which is for a bunch of kids who love horror movies and love to like create real horror situations in real life and like prank their classmates, and then things take a dark turn. And it was amazing. My favorite YA thriller probably that I've ever read, other than A Good Girl's Guide to Murder. The next question is a book that lived up to the hype. And ironically, the very first vlog I did this year was actually called Reading the Highest Rated Books on my Goodreads TBR. So I read a bunch of really hyped up books at the beginning of the year, and none of them disappointed. Like, they all lived up to it. So one of the books I read in that blog was A Court of Mist and Fury by Sarah J Maas, which I have already mentioned this series. But this was the second book in her ACOTAR series, and it's my favorite book in the series that I've read so far. This is the one that really focused on the development of the romance between our two main characters, and it was such a beautiful like slow burn enemies to friends to lovers that I just really enjoyed it. The other book that lived up to the hype in that blog was The Love Hypothesis by Ali Hazelwood. I wasn't expecting to love this as much as I did just because romance isn't my genre per se. It's very hit or miss with me, but this one just really delivered. Again, it had some really great tropes, including fake dating, grumpy sunshine, guy falling for the girl first and like pining after her. It was very good. I would recommend if you haven't gotten to it. The next question is to name a book that did not live up to the hype. So now's the time to spill the tea. So easily one that I can say for this is The Awakening, aka the first book in the Zodiac Academy series. I read this book for a video where I read books I thought I was gonna hate, so I did kind of anticipate that I wouldn't like it, but it's a really hyped up series on Book Talk and BookTube. So I really wanted to like it, especially because I am into astrology, and the plot of this book involves astrology, obviously with the title Zodiac Academy. But unfortunately, this was just so bad and easily my lowest rated book that I read this year. It is a like dark romance fantasy about these twin girls who go to this magical school, which sounds like such a fun premise, right? But there was just like bully romance to the extreme. Like, I don't even feel like I reached the romance part in it. It was just bullying that these men were doing to these girls. It made me really uncomfortable, and the writing also was not good. So another one I guess would be A Little Life. If you guys watched me talk about this already, you know that it traumatized me. So in a way, maybe it did live up to the hype because I heard that it would do that, and it did. But I still see some people really commending this book and loving it and recommending it, and it didn't really live up to that for me. I think I gave it like a 2 or 2.5 star rating, which was really just because it had beautiful writing and it really made you connect with the characters. But unfortunately, it was just such a traumatic experience that I cannot in good faith recommend this at all. Next question is a book that felt like an accomplishment. I'm gonna piggyback off my last question and say A Little Life really felt like an accomplishment. It took me a while to read it. I actually had to take a break from reading it, so when I finally finished it, it definitely was a relief. Another one that felt like an accomplishment was when I read The Hobbit. If you know me, you may know that I have never watched or read anything with Lord of the Rings. I have not even seen the movies, but I own all the books because I would like to make my way through them. So I made my first move towards that by reading The Hobbit. So I definitely felt accomplished reading that, and hopefully I can continue on with the series and eventually watch the adaptations as well. Next up is favorite character. I have a few. One of them has got to be, I'll bring this back out, but Selwyn from the Legendborn cycle. That is this man here. He is one of Bree's love interests in this book. He is a Merlin, so he's kind of like descended from Merlin and has like magical powers, and his kind is destined to protect Bree and the other people like her. It's a whole big magic system, but he is like the Damon of the series, the Damon Salvatore from Vampire Diaries. That's the easiest way to explain him. He's very like rough around the edges, can be like mean and rude, but at the end of the day he'll do whatever it takes to protect those that he loves. It's just a great dynamic. Yeah. Another character I really enjoyed was Charlie from Book Lovers, and not just because he was a hunk and like a great love interest, but because I really related to his character in this dynamic. He was the one that I just felt for more, as he is like a small town boy that moves to the city and then just is way happier there and doesn't want to get trapped back in his hometown, which is definitely something that I relate to. He obviously also loves books, which is relatable too. But I'm sure you guys have heard of this. It won for Best Romance of the Year, I believe, in the Goodreads Choice Awards. But it is about a enemies to lovers relationship between a literary agent and a book editor, and when they both end up in this small town for the summer, they end up falling in love. It's really beautiful and one of my favorite romances that I've ever read. Next up, of course, is gonna be who is your least favorite character. The one that I could think of was the gardener from The Butterfly Garden by Dot Hutchison. This is a thriller book that was pretty good, but it was just so disturbing for me, like I had to rate it a little bit lower. But it is about this man called the gardener, and he kidnaps young girls like around the age 16, and he keeps them locked up in this garden, and he treats them like his own personal like collection of butterflies, and you can imagine like he does a lot of disturbing things with them. And he also has some family members that also are very disturbed and very evil, and so I really hated those characters for some obvious reasons. But yeah, it was really hard to read like so much about those characters in this book. Yeah, just really disgusting. Next up is what was your most shocking book moment, and one of them would probably be for me giving a nonfiction a 5-star rating. So I normally don't read any nonfiction, but I decided to do it for a vlog where I tried out reading 3 nonfiction books, and I actually ended up giving one 5 stars, and that was Shy. This was about being shy and how you can still be successful. It talks about how shyness isn't always a bad thing, how a lot of people treat it like it is, and how you can still be successful even with being shy. And so as a self-identified shy person, that was very interesting to read, and I really enjoyed just relating to the author so much, and it was nice to feel seen, you know? A couple books that I found the most shocking, I'm gonna go with Rock, Paper, Scissors by Alice Feeney. I hear that she's like the queen of crazy twists, and that's definitely true. This was the only book I've read from her so far, but I do plan on reading her book Daisy Darker soon, and I'm very excited. But Rock, Paper, Scissors just goes off the rails. Like, it goes crazy. Some people critique it that it's like it's not realistic, but you know what, twists don't always have to be realistic. Another pretty shocking book that I read was The House Across the Lake by Riley Sager. I feel like this went in some very unique directions that you don't always see in thriller books. Even though this has a very basic premise to start, it just goes in some really shocking directions. And this is about a woman who lives across the lake from this couple, and when the wife disappears, she takes it upon herself to try and figure out where the wife went, and just really escalates from there. Next up is favorite couple / OTP. I'm just gonna quickly show these books because I've already talked about it. Bree and Selwyn, Nora and Charlie. Enough said. Next question is, what is the best written book you've read this year? I'm gonna shout out Ashley Winstead again. I know I already talked about In My Dreams I Hold a Knife, but I also read The Last Housewife, her more newer release. I read both of these books with my book club, and I think it's just a testament to her writing that like all of us rated these so highly, and we were all so moved by them. Even though I didn't love The Last Housewife as much, I wish that it was like twistier and stuff. I cannot say anything against her writing. I think it's so good, so easy to read, just so effective compared to some other books out there. So I'm gonna really shout her out here for writing. Next is the book you push the most people to read in 2022. And that would probably be The House Across the Lake by Riley Sager, to be honest. There's a couple of my friends and people who are in my book club that read this book, and I don't think they would have read it normally, but they saw me talk about it and like really hype it up. So I think I pushed it up on their TBR. This got a lot of like negative or like mixed reviews from a lot of other people. So I might have been like one of the only people kind of being a cheerleader for this book, so maybe that's why. Next question is, what's your favorite book cover of the year? I'm just gonna go with books that I read this year, not necessarily were released. One of them is the Ashley Winstead book, The Last Housewife. I think this cover is like really beautiful. I feel like at first you can't really tell what it is, but I just like love the colors of it. I do love purples and pinks, so I just think this one's really stunning, which is ironic because the content of the book is like so disturbing and like not stunning at all, except her writing is. Yeah, I do like this cover, which maybe makes sense of why I also like Blood Sugar by Sasha Rothschild. It kind of has a similar vibe of like these really pretty colors, and like in this one it is like a really pretty sunset as it takes place in Miami. I just think it's really lovely. I also really like the art of the Extraordinary series, so I read Flash Fire this year. Maybe there's a theme. All of these book covers kind of have a really pretty like blues and pinks and stuff going on. But yeah, I just really like the art of these covers. I like how it's the cityscape, the two boys, the font. I don't know, it's cute. Next question is favorite adaptation. So it's definitely got to be The Summer I Turned Pretty TV show. I loved that show. I was living for that. You definitely got to watch that show, even if you haven't read the books. There were maybe like a few questionable things about it with maybe like some of the acting and things, but they just improved on the book series so much, like so much. It's great for like friendship, family, and romance stuff. It's just so easily bingeable. Can't wait for season 2. I know they already filmed it. Really gotta watch this. Another adaptation I more recently watched and loved was the Vampire Academy series that was on Peacock. So I read Vampire Academy like a really long time ago in high school, but this was an adaptation that I really liked. I feel like I haven't heard too many people talk about it, but if you were a fan of the books back then, I think you need to watch this. And even if you weren't, if you want like a fun vampire show similar to Vampire Diaries, I think you should watch this, as it is made by the creator of Vampire Diaries, and I just feel like they do something really interesting with this world. There's a lot of focus on kind of the world building and this like royalty, like monarchy stuff going on. There's also great character stuff, friendship stuff, family stuff, and there's still really great romance too. Not super happy with the adaptation of some of my favorite characters from the books. For example, Christian is not exactly how I pictured him. I'm happy for the actor who's playing his character because he's from Canada. I've actually seen him a few times in person. He was on Degrassi, which filmed here, but he acts way too nice. Like the Christian I'm used to is a little more like rough around the edges, more like emo and stuff. So there's a few things that aren't perfect, but otherwise I was really impressed with it. The next question is, what book made you cry the most? I think one of the saddest, most hard-hitting books I read this year was Monday's Not Coming by Tiffany D. Jackson. She is such a good writer, and this book was just so good and so upsetting. It's about this girl like in around 8th or 9th grade, and her best friend Monday goes missing, and no one seems to really care other than her. And so we're seeing flashbacks to the friendship that they had and their great relationship, and then also seeing this main character trying to find her friend, and then the really sad story of what happened to her friend, which you find out throughout. Just the fact that it's dealing with such young characters going through such hard things, it was really sad. Definitely made me tear up, so definitely gotta mention this book for this question. I also finished a series, and that was the Red Rising series. I'm just gonna hold this whole thing up, but I read Morning Star, and I feel like with any series ending, it's always very like sad. Even if this wasn't my favorite series I've ever read, it's a sci-fi kind of dystopian YA series. Sometimes it wasn't my favorite to read with the action, and it was just really hard to understand this world, but at the end of the day, like there were some big character reveals and things that happened at the end that just were really touching and did bring tears to my eyes. What book made you laugh the most? One of the books that made me laugh the most was You Deserve Each Other. This is a romance I read, I think back in February for a romance reading blog, but I just remember cracking up so much. It's obviously a rom-com about these two people who are engaged to be married. So obviously they already have a relationship, but they are starting to like hate each other. And so they both are kind of trying to push the other one to break up with them because they don't want to do it. And so they're like pranking each other and doing these like crazy things that's super unrealistic. I could see how this wouldn't be for everyone, but to me, I just thought it was very funny and like very out there. And then I also did really like the romance, as it's a second chance romance, so they eventually do figure things out and fall back in love. But I think there were just a lot of entertaining elements in this book. Another romance that I read more recently that I thought was pretty funny was The Mistletoe Motive. However, it wasn't necessarily like a good funny. There was just stuff at the end that was sort of cracking me up in terms of like, there was a smutty scene and they just like kept talking during it, which I found like kind of awkward. Like it wasn't even necessarily like dirty talk, but it was just like talking. And so I don't know, I found it funny in more of like a not great way. But this is still a pretty cute holiday romance if you want to check it out. It has enemies to lovers. It has like the secret pen pal trope if you're into those kind of things. Next up is a new favorite author you discovered this year. I've already mentioned Ashley Winstead a few times, so we don't need to talk about her that much more, but I will mention Sally Rooney. Sally Rooney is a very hyped up author, so it's very basic of me to say that, but I was really intrigued to read her books because of that. I feel like you either really love her or really hate her writing. And I really liked it. I really thought her writing was easy to read. I just consumed them so quick. And I also found a lot of her characters relatable, which they are very flawed characters. So I don't know what that says about me. I just really personally connected with the characters and kind of what they were going through and their flaws. So maybe that's why it's very hit or miss for people, is like you either relate to them or you don't. I don't know. But I really liked her writing style and her books. And I have one more of her books to read left. So I am excited to read that. And I've been watching the TV shows actually for her books. Speaking of adaptations earlier, I wasn't totally amazed by Conversations with Friends, but I am watching Normal People right now and I'm liking it. Next up is Guilty Pleasure Read of the Year. I'm gonna say Sally Rooney again. Conversations with Friends. I read this for my book club and not everyone was obsessed with it, but I really enjoyed that one. Another one I'm gonna say is It's Not Summer Without You by Jenny Han. This is the second book in the Summer I Turned Pretty series. I obviously read this so I could have read them before the TV show. I did enjoy the second one in like a guilty pleasure way. The third one though, like don't bring it up. Another guilty pleasure has to be The It Girl by Ruth Ware. This has very mixed reviews from people, but I gave it 4 stars and really liked it. So I guess I feel a little bit guilty about that because a lot of people complain about Ruth Ware, but I typically give her books at least 4 stars. I still like them. This has a lot of fun tropes. Again, it is about a group of friends where one of them died in college, and now our main character is sort of questioning whether the real person was actually convicted. It's very similar to In My Dreams I Hold a Knife. Not as good, but it still went some interesting places, and I'm pretty sure I was surprised by the twist. I actually did guess who the killer was, but I didn't know how they did it. So yeah, I liked this one. There's a question about your favorite reread of the year, but I don't typically reread books, so I don't have anything to say for this. Another question is, were you happy with your reading this year? And what will you do differently in 2023? So I am happy with my reading this year. I mean, reaching over 100 books, there's really not much more you can ask for, and I feel like I did enjoy a lot of the books that I read. However, something I hope to do differently next year is reading more of the books on my physical TBR. I have a book cart beside me, which maybe I'll show you after, but it is packed full and I keep getting more physical books, but then I do all these other reading challenges and stuff and I read books that are not physically on my bookshelf. So I really want to get through more of the books that I actually own next year. And that's going to end the reading survey tag thing. Thank you guys for watching. If you made it this far, be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. I would really appreciate it, and I look forward to seeing everyone else's end of the year videos and all their reading stats and stuff like that. Be on the lookout. I think I'm gonna make a best books of the year and worst books of the year video, so that should be fun. I hope to see you then in those videos, and I hope you have a great holiday season, spend lots of time with friends and family, and just get to relax. All right. Take care. Bye.